Our first panelist that we have is Robert Hackett, who is a reporter at Fortune, where he covers technology, business, security, blockchain, and much more. He writes for the magazine, website, newsletters, and appears frequently on video series such as Fortune Tech Debate. And before joining Futurism, he served in various roles at Nautilus Magazine, TED conferences, and Johnson & Johnson. He has a double major in chemistry and chemical biology in English at Cornell, and a double minor in science and tech studies and history, and completed graduate school at Columbia Journalism School. Our next panelist is Morgan Peck. She covers a wide range of technology stories as a freelance writer in New York City, focusing mainly on digital currencies and neurotechnology. You can find her work at IEE Spectrum, Scientific American, and BBC Future. Next, we have Alex Klokas, who is the CEO of Futurism, which is a digital media company covering the breakthrough science and technology that will shape humanity. Futurism is viewed by more than 250 million times per month across the globe. Next, we have Laura Shin, who is a Forbes contributor covering cryptocurrency. She's a co-lead reporter at Forbes FinTech 50 list, and also host of the cryptocurrency podcast Unchained. Last, we have Matthew Leising, who is a reporter on the market structure team at Bloomberg News. His coverage includes how blockchain and distributed ledger tech may be applied to finance. Matthew also covers developments and regulatory matters on the derivatives and fixed income markets. He came to Bloomberg after 3 years at Montclair newspaper in Oakland, California. Has also written for the Financial Times and the Village Voice, among other publications. He has a BS degree in biopsychology from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and a master's degree in journalism from the University of California, Berkeley. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's just go ahead and jump right in. Matthew, why is it important for people to understand technology, and more specifically, blockchain?
Sure, thanks. I think there's two levels to this one. First of all, as we're all in this room, we understand the revolution of decentralization and not having a central authority in power, as Bitcoin has proven for 8 years now. That's revolutionary and really amazing. So I feel like that's something that is important to get across to the wider audience. Then on the other hand, when I talk to sources about this, a lot of them say, if this all goes well, I don't want you to know how this works. It's a change in the back end, and it might be a new type of internet, but nobody that really understands the internet. You don't have to understand the internet to use Google or Facebook. So down the road, I'm not sure that the bits and pieces and the nuts and bolts are that important to get across to people, but this sort of like broader shift of getting away from sort of gatekeepers is a fascinating sort of idea.
So basically, it's important for people to understand the revolutionary nature of blockchain, but not necessarily, you don't think, the specifics of how it actually works.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand how TCP/IP works, but I've got a smartphone.
Cool.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I feel like right now at this level of development, it's sort of like us journalists are maybe speaking to the developers. People often talk about there just aren't enough developers in blockchain, and so if we can get people kind of interested in creating projects, then we can get to the level where we're building kind of more consumer-facing things where people don't need to know what the back end is.
That kind of leads into the next question. So Alex, you started a media company that partially covers blockchain. What should journalists and media companies be trying to accomplish today through their coverage of blockchain? Basically, who are we communicating to, and what's the goal here?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm really happy to be here. This event has been so much fun. I think in many respects, what we're doing right now is we are building the foundation, the knowledge foundation, with regards to blockchain for everything that is to come, right? If you think about it, with blockchain, the majority of people still have no idea what blockchain is. We do, this is great, nobody else does. And so the question is what are the key terms, what are the ideas around blockchain that are gonna be instinctual to people in the future, right? With Bitcoin, originally, it was Silk Road. That was a negative association in general. With CRISPR, it was designer babies. With blockchain, it's what? What is the thing? How are we as journalists, as some of the few publications that really focus in on blockchain, going to cover it? And we have to be aware of the fact that the way that we cover it will shape public perception, and then will shape the entire regulatory framework around these things, right? We have a responsibility to make sure that the way that we are reporting on blockchain is fair, it's just, because the way that we report on it, the way that we cover it, will set the foundation for everything that is to come.
So it's basically we're trying to shape the future of how people understand blockchain. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. I mean, I think like we all know about this, right? I mean, the term Ethereum has been around for most of us for a long time now. But again, like most people don't understand it. And so the challenge is getting them to understand it and then getting them to have a positive association with everything that blockchain represents.
So
and I think
literally today, my editor is like, is it the blockchain or blockchain? We need
Exactly.
to make a choice here.
Totally. Yeah, and it is fascinating. And it's fascinating because it is an inherently complex idea, right? You cannot really explain blockchain effectively in like one sentence. And so the question is, how do you explain it? How do you get people interested? How do you get them excited about it? And how do you start the movement globally in the same way that the movement here is starting right now through this event?
So I agree with you, but there's just one aspect of it, which is like if there's something going on that needs to be criticized, then I do not feel any hesitation in calling that out, you know? So of course, like it's really, really important to get across like how powerful this technology is, what the potential is, like all those things. But if people are doing shady shit, which we all know is actually going on right now, then, you know, feel free to say what's going on because—
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Morgan, do you have any comments on, like, in the day-to-day coverage that you do, on how you cast the articles, how you like write about blockchain, and what it is you in particular like trying to accomplish?
Yeah, there are two things that were said that I was going to say I disagree with, but I think it's just more that I have a different priority in my writing. One of which is that we shouldn't be talking just to developers. Or just to people who are in the space, which is kind of what I actually do. I think my writing's more for engineers and tech people. And the other one was, you said, what did you say? Shoot, I can't remember. Oh, you said, I think everybody in this room knows what blockchain is. And I disagree with that. I think that in my reporting, I still meet people with completely different definitions of blockchain, and I think that that's really important to sort out. When I first started writing about this, and I don't either know yet how to properly define it in a concise, stripped-down way. I'm trying to find that still, and I think it's important because when I first started writing about this, I wasn't thinking about who I was writing for and what the importance of it was. I just really thought that the technology was beautiful and that writing about it was a way for me to get paid to like figure out how it worked. But since we've hit sort of a hype bubble, I think that we should be held accountable, if anything, mostly for making people use the excitement in a responsible way. Because the excitement around this is really great, but it can be abused. And I think that the hype comes from two different places. It can come from not understanding how the tech works and just being naive to what you're building. And do you really need a blockchain? And what is a blockchain? It also comes from definitions being unclear. I started writing about Bitcoin, and the purpose was very clear. The application was very clear. And so, but what wasn't clear were all the definitions around it. And now that we've turned from Bitcoin to blockchain, I think people are still figuring out like what that word means, what the essential features of it are, and that can, when there's that kind of confusion, it can be abused in certain ways. And I take it as my responsibility to sort of strip down to a fundamental level and define those terms.
Yeah. So to kind of like go along those lines and dive in a little bit deeper, Robert, what are some of the specific problems, like the primary issues that you see when it comes to covering blockchain? What are the main things that journalists are faced with right now and need to consider?
Well, I'll say one of the more annoying things is having to have that paragraph that explains everything very, very summarily. That's a constant struggle for me, and something my editors constantly like hit me over the head and tell me to keep doing. I want to reiterate what Morgan said. I think that's a really good point, that some of these terms don't really have great definitions as of yet. last year at Fortune's Brainstorm Tech Conference, we did a blockchain panel. We had a bunch of people speak, one of which was the CEO of Chain, Adam Ludwin. And I remember he got into a bit of a tussle with somebody, and it was my favorite part of the panel. He got into a tussle because somebody said that they were working on a medical blockchain, something in healthcare. And he was like, that's not blockchain, that's a cryptographically signed database. Blockchain needs to have some kind of financial asset that you're transacting over it. But anyway, yeah, even the people who are working on this stuff disagree over the terminology.
And to build on that, I mean, and echoing what was said earlier, though, even if people disagree about the definition and the idea and how to explain blockchain effectively, ultimately it doesn't matter, right? Like, most people don't understand how the internet works, yet they operate on the internet. At some point in the future, many things are going to be operated, the kind of underlying pipes to everything is going to be the blockchain. And people aren't going to need to understand at a granular level what the blockchain is. All they need to know is that somewhere out there is the blockchain, and it is operating, it is the backbone of nearly everything that they ultimately will interact on, the way that they transact, and everything like that.
So it sounds like one of the problems then is trying to figure out what people need to know versus what's kind of getting just too nitty-gritty and maybe pedantic. Yeah. Laura, you'd said earlier that one of the things that you don't shy away from is covering issues, like problems with the blockchain. How do you navigate that, or how do you think journalists, and looking about it larger, should try and navigate this?
Well, so like I said, I think journalists shouldn't have any fear in saying something critical that's going on just because it's new and just because obviously it's not like we want to discourage the development or do anything that will change the perception so much that regulators come down in some really heavy-handed way. But like I said earlier, I do feel like if there are things that people are doing that are kind of inappropriate, kind of like what Vinay Gupta said at the beginning in his little video speech where he was like, oh, like we really should be self-regulated. I'm starting to see that just already happening in the community when I talk with people, particularly kind of about the ICO situation. It's one of those things where it's like really difficult to detect, but I'm sure that we're all aware that there are probably people out there that are like, oh, I'm just gonna like raise some money by creating this coin, and it's gonna be a really easy way to make, even if it's just like $1 million, which, as you all know is like not a lot of money for an ICO, that's enough for like a group of people to be able to jet set around the world and tell people about their project, but maybe not really ever release anything. So, it's just one of those things where like kind of, you can't really figure out what the intention is, but we sort of kind of all sense that some people are taking advantage of this space right now when it's not regulated.
Just to add really quick on that, and I completely agree. I mean, I think from the perspective of a media company covering this, we don't want to obviously be biased positively, but we want to be conscious of the impact of what we say. For example, with CRISPR, right? CRISPR is the gene editing technology. CRISPR smashed onto the scene through one MIT Technology Review article in like 2011, right? It said, CRISPR is the breakthrough of the decade. This is it. And the rest of the article kind of framed CRISPR negatively. It said CRISPR is going to lead to a lack of diversity, it will lead to designer babies, all of these things. And in general, the way that media works is it's like a domino effect, right? Like half the people have no idea what they're talking about. And so if MIT Technology Review covers something negatively, that trickles down into other publications. And then they take the same tone, they take the same idea, and they run with it. And then ultimately you have a new technology like CRISPR that is now, in general, framed negatively across the internet with all of these articles. There is some public backlash about CRISPR. What are we doing about CRISPR? And then regulators come out and they say, oh, there's clearly public backlash around this thing I don't understand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just place a moratorium on research. I'm going to say stop. This is going to stop in the US. And that's essentially what happened. And China said, oh no, we're not stopping this, right? CRISPR has an incredible potential to revolutionize humanity. We're going to push forward. China did that. They released incredible research. Europe quickly followed after and said, wow, we can't be left behind here. We're going to start using CRISPR to genetically modify human embryos. And then the US ultimately said, whoa, like we need to do this too. So then they removed the moratorium. And I think what I'm saying is that just at the end of the day, we sometimes don't realize how much power and how much influence we have around relatively complex science and technology topics. And so we should be very conscious of the way that we portray them in our work because you never know who's on the other end of that piece.
Yeah, and I actually just want to amend my comments because I don't want people to think I'm like super negative on this space. I'm definitely not. If any of you've read my stuff or like listen to my podcast, you definitely know that I'm not like that. But I do feel like because there's this financial element, there's sort of a responsibility. If I do sense, which I am starting to see that like the space is starting to self-regulate. Like I just wrote this article about how AngelList and Juan Bennett of Protocol Labs or Filecoin, they're doing like this coinless thing, which just kind of is a frame. It has two aspects. There's a framework to enable people to do ICOs in a legal way. In the U.S., of course, it involves accredited investors instead of just average retail investors. But still, like I kind of already see it happening. So if that happens, like of course I'm happy to report that. I'm actually literally happy to report that.
So it's maybe like, covering it, not shying away from stories, but being mindful about not being all doom and gloom.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And you had something to add, Morgan?
I actually just wanted to ask a question. I'm wondering what your experience has been with people when you are, when you do take a harsh stand against something, or, I've had pretty good experience with people. They appreciate it when I deliver that kind of content, but I'm wondering what your experiences are. Sorry.
Oh, no. Anyone have any comment on that? Like what the experience is when we do report these more negative, in quotes, stories?
I mean, well, I don't know if I've ever like done anything where where I have an opinion that's negative. It's generally like if something's going on, then I'm happy to report it. I think honestly, the only thing I've ever noticed is if I write about the Bitcoin scaling thing, which of course is just like the worst, but then sometimes I get the super ideological people on either side being like, well, you said this, but to me actually it's a good sign if I get people on both sides criticizing my article, then I'm like, okay, then I did a good job. Then it's like, they each feel that like there's some, aspect of the coverage that was like not necessarily not fair to them, but that they wanted only their side represented, and I represented both sides. So,
Matthew, do you have some comments, or?
I would just say the feedback I get, no matter how many companies I list as also being involved, like Chain and R3, I always hear from others that I don't, and it's just like how many paragraphs do you want me to just have a list?
Yeah.
So it's crowded, and that's great, but I also feel it is a bit emotional at this stage because there's a lot at stake, and there's people are racing to actually put something out that's real and tangible, and we haven't seen a whole lot of that yet. But so I feel like compared to my other beats on like the bond market and the derivatives market, the emotion is just cranked up to 11 here.
So kind of stemming from that, like Robert, what's something that you would like to see more of in coverage of blockchain, how it's covered, or anything like that?
Well, so I guess I'll say one thing is that I think it's a lot of fun to cover this space. It's sort of like covering sports. People are betting on these different blockchains and what's going to be, the one that prevails. So I have a lot of fun with it. And although there is a lot of vitriol in the space, people are divisive. They are kind of betting on the one that they think is going to win. They have financial stakes. They have interests in this. It's kind of great to be a sort of mediator who is impartial and can kind of just highlight the best of the projects and also the points at which they fail. Is
there anything in particular you'd like to see more of, though, in blockchain coverage, like journalists or media companies doing something differently or more frequently?
Well, it's hard to say if there's something that I would want more of. Maybe I'll just address a challenge that I have right now, specifically in the ICO space. There are so many of these projects coming online and going and doing a token sale that it becomes very difficult for a reporter like me to suss out what is legitimate, what is potentially a scam. It is a very, very green field right now. And so, yeah, that's a personal challenge that I have.
Just to jump into that really quick, I mean, I think we need more content around the blockchain, period. Like across the board. And to build off your point, there's a token launch like every day right now. And it is amazing. These companies are raising real amounts of money. And you know what you have to do to understand what the hell is going on with the token? You need to read their white paper. You need to read a 40-page white paper. Like, and even then you still have no idea, right? You have to research the team. Like, there needs to be a better review process, a better rating system around which one of these things are legitimate, which are not. I mean, they're like you said, it's like green grass. There's so much opportunity to create content around these token launches right now, and it is amazing that nobody is doing it. And I think nobody is doing it because there is still not really enough demand to justify allocating a lot of resources to doing it, meaning to covering these token launches. Like if you cover, let's say you write a review on a token launch, right? Most media companies make money based on the quantity of people that read that article. And not enough people read that article. The people that read it might derive a lot of value from it, but because the payment to the publisher is not based on value necessarily, it's based on quantity, there's not really enough incentive to cover the token launches in the way that they need to be covered.
So it sounds like what you're saying is we need more people now who are willing to do the legwork to get people to where they are consuming and wanting to consume and understand and want to learn more about blockchain.
Yes.
Cool.
Can I edit that?
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think we need more content. I think we need more reporters.
Sure.
I think we need something in between the layer of reporters and the people making the content too. I think we're missing research that would make
Agreed.
Make it possible to not have to read a 40-page white paper, although ideally you just would do that. But we're missing the people in the middle that are the experts on this because it's such a nascent field, and I'm looking forward to that filling in.
So as journalists then, you feel that it would make your jobs easier if there were more experts, more researchers who were speaking to this and the applications that you could then jump off of?
Yeah, I mean, like, I actually sometimes feel like there just aren't even enough sources sometimes for some of the questions that I have, because, like, it's one thing if you have a background as a business journalist and you can kind of like evaluate the business idea, but then that's a totally different thing from understanding the crypto economics of like whether or not that token is designed in such a way that the value of it's going to rise if the business model takes off, which it's just like, it's such a different question and you need to actually understand both, which is why, for these kinds of evaluations of tokens, like it does take a long time because you need to like understand how the whole thing works, then you need to understand the function of the token, and so yeah, it's.
Yeah.
And sometimes I try to do a shortcut where I like ask, someone that I consider a smart person in this space, and like they're sometimes not even sure themselves. So.
And then just a quick comment, Alex, because we have a minute left.
Yeah, just to build off that point, I mean, I think we're seeing like this token craze right now, and it's amazing. But the thing is, like, there's no media around it, and so you can imagine if there is, and once there is really good, high-quality media around these tokens, reviewing them, helping push this mainstream, helping get it out there, helping market these tokens. I mean, I think like this is only the beginning. And things are going to continue to get more and more crazy when it comes to all of this for the next, like, through the year, for sure.
And I feel like I'm cutting this conversation really, really short. It's been fantastic, but sadly that's all we have time for. So hopefully we can do this again soon because there's a lot more to be said here. Thank you.
Thanks.